Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Day at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the Western economies are being massively disrupted, how capitalism, how any organic or natural, any organic flow of activity or market forces, how it's all being manipulated, disrupted, interdicted, completely emasculated, all of it in aid of forcing through and implementing the globalist project. Now, the globalist project is inherently anti-capitalist or anti-natural organic market forces. It's going to be capitalist for the 1 in 500 who are going to have vast wealth and lots of prime cuts of steak and private jets and everything at their disposal, while the rest of us gradually, in fact quite quickly these days, put into a condition of medieval serfdom. But let's just have a look at some of the issues here that or how and where the Western economies are being disrupted and torn to pieces in many aspects, certainly in terms of natural organic market force capitalism, all in aid of the globalist project. Now, it's these interdictions and disruptions and so on, they're not in aid of giving all of us a better standard of living. They're purely, absolutely 100% laser focused on the implementation of the globalist project. Now, the money or the cost and the disruption, the cost of the disruption and so on, has to come from somewhere. It has to be paid for somewhere. And it's not being created or paid for by increasing wealth. In fact, if you look at wealth increasing has stalled. It's all being paid for by debt. And so, again, that's a very artificial means of achieving such an artificial outcome. So let's have a look at some of those. Now, I'll go to say when the mass immigration started in Australia, 25 or so years ago. Now, there was immigration before, but it wasn't on any grand scale. But when it started, it was claimed by the government, look, only qualified people with serious qualifications needed in the economy who speak good English will be allowed in, and everyone else is going to have to, they won't be able to become migrants to Australia. Only people who are going to help the economy, that are needed by the economy, and so on. Now, that simply didn't happen. People who were 100% illiterate in English and minimally literate in their own language, if not illiterate in their own language, started to arrive pretty much straight away. The China. Now, again, I spoke pretty decent Mandarin at the time, and so I could tell that these people coming from China were illiterate peasants from the rural hinterland of China. These weren't skilled workers, far from it. And they were doing the things like the dishwashing, and they were cleaners and all that sort of stuff, and also living a very peasant lifestyle, 20 of them to a 2-bedroom apartment and that sort of thing. So now the people that were coming in couldn't compete with the locals, so they were allowing in people that, again, were illiterate in their own language and couldn't speak English, and they couldn't compete with the locals for jobs. And the Indians, in particular, that kind of some of them spoke, passable English. They were feeling particularly hard done by because they had third world university qualifications and so on weren't recognised in the first world, justifiably and reasonably so, because they're nearly all going through corrupt practices. So you bribe the lecturer to give you the degree. That's just how it works in these third world countries. It's considered prestigious. If you have a degree, it doesn't mean that you've learned something and you're proficient in that subject. It means you've got enough money to bribe the lecturer to get the degree, which puts you in a position of great prestige. And, wow, he's got so much money, he can bribe the fucking lecturer to get the PhD. What a heavy hitter! And that's very much a third world mentality. So they command respect in their own country because of their power to corrupt and bribe. Now, when they come to a first world country like Australia, though, these degrees weren't accepted. So you had these people, say from India or Pakistan, or whatever, who may have spoken, passable English, and or sort of, but they come to Australia and find that their qualifications aren't recognised. You think they might have done a bit of research beforehand, or even be told that they were, but they probably bribed the immigration officials anyway, because the immigration departments or embassies in Pakistan and India, there's a lot of Indians and locals working there, and they're eminently available and open to being bribed in order to rubber stamp someone's immigration or visa stamp their passport and that sort of thing. So you had a lot of these people arriving, and a lot of them were Brahmins, the upper class Indians. Maybe the lower sector, the Brahmins, they've got the Brahmin club, but they're not super rich. They're rich enough, but they're not super rich, or not by first world standards at least. So they come to Australia. They've got no recognised qualifications. They actually have no expertise. They're modestly literate, in the case of the Indians, for example, but they just can't get jobs. They can't compete with the locals. Either their accent's too thick, or they. And I like years ago, I had these people coming to companies that I worked at for jobs, I'm just thinking of one now. The one's just popped into my head. It was a Chinese lady, and her husband was allegedly a doctor in China, but the only job he could get in Australia was driving taxis or something like that. So now she claimed that she was like an economist or something in China, well qualified one, but her qualifications weren't recognised in a first world country. So she was struggling even to get a job as a receptionist or an administration assistant in an office, that sort of thing. And I could tell she was deeply exasperated and humiliated. And she was telling me through her broken English, and I was helping her a bit with my Mandarin, that if you're that well qualified in China, if you're doing that well, if you have those sort of prestigious qualifications there, then why did you come to Australia? You're in your 30s. This is if you're in your early 20s maybe, but you're in your 30s. Why are you coming to a first world country where you don't speak the language, your qualifications aren't recognised, and where you're reduced to begging for jobs as a fucking receptionist? Why do it to yourself? And they couldn't really give me an answer. It's a different quality of life and that sort of. Well, sure, no, I get all that. Okay, no, I understand that. You've come from a very overcrowded, massively overcrowded city, and you're coming to the West, first world country. But why do you come with qualifications that aren't recognized? Why didn't you spend 5 years learning English before you came here? Things like that. Why didn't you do your preparation? And really, as far as I'm just reading between the lines, I think a relative of theirs had somehow got a job in the Australian embassy in like fucking Peking or something like that, and they bribed the relative, or the relative had decided to do it for family connection reasons, to get them a visa, working visa to go to Australia and that sort of stuff. So I'm reading between the lines on that one, but anyway, this was the status of the people who were arriving here from these third world countries into Australia. So the government was firstly letting these people move in to Australia, which was wrong in the first place. But then when they couldn't compete for jobs, obviously they couldn't. They weren't qualified in anything, couldn't speak the fucking language, had completely alien customs and habits and so on. What we let these people in, the people couldn't compete. There's a lot of the government looks at, wow, these people can't get jobs. It's a real issue here. We can't just have them sort of on the street. We've got to do something here. I know what we'll do. We'll disadvantage the local white population to help these people out. That's what we'll do. So we'll create quotas, racial quotas, and all sorts of quotas in the public service. And on top of that, we'll just multiply the amount of jobs in the public service so that we can give all these people jobs, even if it's do nothing jobs where they sit there and pretend to be important all day, just like they would in their third world, shithole countries. It's not that much different there. People don't do much. They pretend to be important and sit at desks and the like. So they multiplied out of sight the amount of public service jobs just so they could give them to the brown and black migrants that had no qualifications, that couldn't speak English and so on. Then they lowered the requirements. So if you've got some sort of corrupt bullshit degree from the University of I don't know, Calcutta or New Delhi or something like that, or Punjab. You get any of those qualifications, we'll now accept those. We may give you some bullshit quick verbal test from some very politically correct committee that's under a lot of pressure to pass as many black and brown people as they can, but that's all. So they lowered the educational standards. Now, this is when the next wave of sort of immigrants came, but we can see here how the whole economy is now being perverted. Strict gender and race quotas in big firms. The government was leaning on the big firms to do it, and across the entire public service. So natural organic market force in terms of who you hire, their qualifications, the contribution they can make, whether the person's even needed. Because remember, in the public service, they're just multiplying all these jobs for just so they can give illiterate brown people employment. And then having quotas on the real jobs so that white people can't get the job or the locals can't get the job. It's insane. But this is the level of disruption to natural organic market forces in a capitalist economy, going completely in contravention to a capitalist economy. This is how the centrally planned Soviet communist economies worked. The job allocations and the quotas and all this sort of stuff. So then the next wave came when they lowered the standards. So, and this is where I encountered it again, more personally than I had, and more directly. So I'm like VP at this company, and the new product development department sort of reports directly into me in this case, and so I'm interested in hiring people who are, can cut software code, who are experts and in the latest thing. And there was a flood of Indians arrived, and they all had, these sterling qualifications. I mean, triple PhDs on steroids, and I was in awe of them. Wow, look at this! Whoa, gee, this guy's well qualified. And they were Brahmins, all of them, which just means they had a lot of money to bribe the lecturers to get the degree. But and they were quite cultured and immaculately dressed, and they were, they all spoke like they were, they were like fucking Socrates from ancient Athens. They had this very philosophical, sort of expansive view of the world. They spoke like raconteurs and so on. And I, to some degree, relate to that type of thing. I think, okay, these were impressive people. And again, on paper, they looked very high-powered. And as I mentioned in numerous other videos, I've hired these guys on the strength of their qualifications, and that they came across very well at the interview. And so they would start as maybe they'd have a particular area of programming, computer coding to work in. And so they days would go by, and the R&D manager, who was a white guy, would come to me and say, "Oh, look, Ram or whatever, he's not doing so good here. He doesn't seem to be doing anything, and he talks a good fight, but just doesn't do any work." So, okay, well, gee, all right then. Well, let's have a chat to Ram. So we'd go around, we'd go to Ram's desk, and he'd have a pile of papers on his desk. What was in the papers, I don't know. And then he took the view of, well, you've got no right to question me. I'm far too socially important to do that, and you people are lower down the social scale than me, so you're not allowed to ask me questions. I ask you. You don't ask me. And I tell you, you don't tell me. And so, and very much a class thing, like the Brahmin shit coming in again, and that very class-based society that the Indians have. and again, the guy, if he's that philosophical, he'd learn or he'd know and understand that he's in a different country now where that caste system doesn't apply. So it was being used quite defensively. You've got no right to question me, which is quite reflexive and demonstrates that in India, no one's got a right to question them and they can do whatever they want to any of the lower castes. And that's kind of how it works. So I I remember, talking to the guy, and he points to the pile of papers on his desk. Look how much work. Look how much work I have. I have all this work, and you are bothering me. And I said, no, buddy. Your job is to cut code. You have to do it. But it turned out, I'll abbreviate this. It turned out that he couldn't cut a line of code to save his life. His whole CV, everything was bullshit. And he sort of intimates as much, saying, "Look, this is what a powerful heavy hitter I am. I had to bribe the crap out of not one but 3 or 4 lecturers to be able to get this PhD. That's what a powerful heavy hitting happening dude I am. I've got the financial resources and the social clout to do that. That makes me a heavy hitter. The fact that I can't cut a line of code to save my life, irrelevant. It doesn't change my social status." And it's the idea of work and productivity and social status, it's sort of quite different over in the subcontinent. And this idea that you have to actually do work and earn your keep, as it were, earn your pay, is something that draws sort of blank stares. You rude, impertinent little fuck. How dare you tell me I have to work? And that type of thing. So here again, the market forces thing, that why is it that the local people still have to have degrees and qualifications and expertise that they can prove and demonstrate? Because when you see somebody from, or used to be, not so much now, but at the time, when you see someone who's got a computer science degree from the University of Sydney or Australian University or a first world university, the standard to which, give or take the standard to which they qualify, that they can cut code. If they couldn't cut code, they couldn't have got that degree. But it's not the same in third world countries. Very few, if anybody has actually learned the curriculum as we would understand it in the West and in the first world. So here's an example of, or yet another example of, market forces being bypassed and circumvented. The white people, the local people, still have to prove they know what they're doing. Whereas these people can come in and their degrees, which are manifestly worthless, absolutely not even worth the paper they're written on, they're just being waved through now by Western immigration officials and so on as having a valid degree. Now, in some cases, say that somebody's going to be, a surgeon, they still do have a little bit of a check to see if they know. But as we see in England and elsewhere around the West, many third world doctors are being waved through with minimal check. I've had some of the third world doctors I've had to interact with, seriously. They're like first year medical students, and even then affirmative action students, and all they've got is their little fucking checklist to go through. I don't think they know dog shit about anything to do with medicine. Now, but given the non-critical nature of as if you're not holding a scalpel over someone's, but as in the non-critical nature, as it was perceived at least, of computer programming in many other fields of discipline, these people waved through and their degrees were suddenly recognised. Now, if there'd been a situation where they had to sit a local exam before they would be given, with somebody they couldn't bribe, like not another Indian that they could just bribe, but a completely independent, impartial examination process, then they would be picked up there. So, hey, buddy, it's driving taxis for you. You're not going to be able to you can do the course again in Australia if you want, but until you pass this test, you're not going to get a piece of paper that says you meet local levels of proficiency. So there's just, again, two examples of how market forces were being bypassed, where somebody with a third world degree that wasn't worth a pinch of shit is considered to be, on paper at least, considered to be have exactly the same worth as someone who's completed a rigorous examination and course in the local university. Now that's changing, but now with again all the affirmative action and that sort of stuff in Australia. But back then you could count on someone who had that degree, was qualified and really knew their shit if they'd got the degree locally. But you had no such thing looking at the overseas or the third world degrees. Like if someone came from Britain or America with a computer science degree, then you would know, yes, that they can do it, and you wouldn't need to interrogate them on it. But all the certainly every single third world individual that came through certainly that door applied, and it got to the point where I wouldn't accept. I so look, before we even talk about anything. To the guy from the third world, before we even go any further with this, you're going to need to sit down and cut a line of code in front of us, like say the head of R&D or the guy in charge of the programming section or something like that, who about what. So you're going to have to cut a line of code in front of us. And, 9 times out of 10, the guy would just get up and walk out. Lots of bluster, how dare you, and lots of, blowing smoke and that sort of thing. The reality is they couldn't fucking do it. And the ones that could, the very small number of the ones that could were, you wouldn't rate them as more than beginner or juniors. They were not sort of programmers or coders to any sort of high level. And it came down to the simple fact if I wanted a super capable programmer, they would all be straight white males, every single one of them. That's just how it was. Now, maybe it's changed, or people might say, well, that's only because of racism and because of Hitler. But no, there was just, they were educated to a higher standard and had met higher standards of education, and therefore they were better, at least at coding, or at other things too. You get the the dolly birds coming in from India saying they've got a degree in marketing or something. No, they fucking didn't. I don't know what they did, but again, I'm sure they were bribing the lecturers to get the degree, and it was a very class and caste based thing. Now, coming to the UK at the moment, they're letting in all these alleged asylum seekers and alleged refugees, and if you compare the rates of refugee acceptance in say Britain and certain other countries, the United States, for example, where the globalists are particularly concerned with completely crushing, eradicating all white history and white culture, the acceptance rate of refugees is quite astonishing. I mean, the rates are as high as 80% for people who apply. Then you've got people that claim to be children or claim that, some other claim they've made, which takes them out of the direct refugee laneway or pathway into something else. So the actual rate of people that are allowed to stay, human rights and this and that and the next thing, the actual rate of people is incredibly high. I mean, it's pushing near to 100%. Now, that's impossible in any real world scenario, so we can see just how corrupted it is. So natural forces are obviously being avoided there. If someone is a genuine refugee, then, sure, that there's maybe a case. But this idea, I feel there's a better life, that might be a better life for me available on welfare in the West than in my dirt poor shithole impoverished country that I'm living, then... You're not a refugee, buddy. So now some of the big international firms are dealing themselves into the game here because the government's decided to keep all these people claiming we have a moral obligation. No, you don't. There's no fucking moral obligation. Well, a load of bullshit. That itself is bypassing natural organic forces. We have a moral obligation. Therefore, all reality, all facts, all costs are irrelevant because we have this moral responsibility, which is a wonderful catchphrase throughout there. And I was listening to the British Home Minister, Home Secretary, saying that, was talking really big and tough about, I will not allow these illegal freeloading aliens to be on the street or to live in anything other than upper middle class accommodation. I will not allow it, she says. What a tough chick. Whoa. So then these people are being put up in these illegals are being put up in 4-star, 5-star hotels. that's becoming a little bit owned. You have some bad media and press is going up on that, particularly as local people are doing it tough, with their energy bills and so on, whilst these illegals from third world countries who have never known the standard of living anything resembling a 4 or 5-star hotel, and who are very entitled, by the way, they're coming in, and they're supposed to be, the government is supposed to be morally obligated to give them a 5-star lifestyle. What a fucking joke. Anyway, they're now going out into the private rental market, and also the social housing market, and all of which, private citizens have to go through the proper channels for getting social housing, and or the private rental market. Now, what companies like Serco and so are doing, and this is in the public domain, it's hardly a secret, is they're going to people who have properties for rent, and it could be anybody. If you've got a property to rent, if you're a landowner or a landlord and you've got an investment property, Serco's coming to you and say, look, we'll block book your property for X years, and we'll pay above market rent. We'll pay all the bills, utilities, water, and everything, rates, everything will be paid for. We'll take care of the lot. You don't have to worry about a thing, and you'll get your monthly check guaranteed and underwritten by the government, and da-da-da. So now you've got a choice of now renting your apartment or your house, whatever it is, for $100 a week to a private local renter, and running the risks that they, what if they leave? What if they pay the rent, don't pay the rent or something, or that sort of thing. Or you can get $120 a week guaranteed, with all other bills paid and everything taken care of. So you need to do nothing other than sit back and watch the money roll in. And if these third world migrants trash the joint, which they probably will, then it's underwritten and guaranteed that your whole place is going to be refurbed and remodeled back to original condition, also guaranteed, and that time will be paid for, so you don't lose out on income and rental income during that time. So this is a deal that this is like, wow, this is, you'd have to be a real patriot to turn down an offer like that. It's a good offer. Let's now, but Serco isn't a company that does things for nothing. They want to make a profit, and do. Their profits are quite handsome. So what's the government paying them to do that? So that they're obviously being paid handsomely from the taxpayer coffers. So this is a diversion of money away from what would naturally occur in a market economy. Similarly, these landlords are making, property owners, they're making decisions now unrelated to economic circumstances and conditions. Similarly, these illegals, illiterate and unemployed, and living a very different lifestyle and very different behavioural standards to what are typical in Britain, they would not be able to compete on the local rental market. Now, why bring out people to a country that cannot compete in the local rental? Well, why do it? I mean, why the fuck do it? So here again, we see a bypassing of market forces and of natural organic market forces. You bring out people that can't compete, and then you just tear the economy to pieces, just trash any natural organic market forces to then favour them uniquely as a group, but favour them against the locals who can easily and handily and happily compete, now cannot compete. You're handicapping them to the tune of just in the rents and on costs alone, probably 30 to 40%. Now, some property owners say, well, look, I'm not happy about renting the property to these illegals. I do want to rent it to some local people. But given that I can, instead of $100 a week, because I can now get the equivalent value of $140 a week by giving it, renting it out through the government and so on to these illegals, because I can get equivalent to $140. I now want $140 a week in rent from the locals. So I let the locals rent it, but I now want a premium rent because that's what I could have got from these non-market forces method. So then you see an artificial inflation in the amount of money being paid for rent or even property purchasing for that matter. Again, this bypassing of market forces is tearing our economy to pieces in employment, in investment, in people paying rent, in energy. The energy. Nothing is natural about the energy, organic about the energy. They're forcing alternative energy, which is uneconomical and unreliable, and then forcing people to pay more on the basis of some moral issue to do with it's our responsibility to save the climate, and so this is. And I just want you to look now at also things like when the COVID thing was on, how many government contracts were awarded to crony buddies of government and relatives and so on. Again, a bypassing of market forces. The natural information supporting the COVID thing did not underwrite the behaviour that governments were going to that were implementing, such as the extent and severity of lockdowns and so on. So we see all across the economy, in the vertical and the horizontal plane, that there is massive tampering with natural market forces, and this is coming at great cost to all of us other than the elites. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.